never know if you don't go. You'll never shine if you don't glow. Hey now, you're an all-star. Get your game on, go play. Hey now, you're a rock star. Get the show on, get paid. Only shooting stars break the mold.
Welcome to another episode of the NRL Allstars podcast. Barnesy here, host of the Allstars podcast, here for TLT round 2 and SuperCoaches well underway. Big first round for this week. We're going to go through the normal old TLT format that every All-Star listener is used to. So we're going to go through, first of all, some strategy talk. Then we're going to talk about Market Watch, going through the most popular trade-ins and trade-outs on the market at the moment for SuperCoach. And then we are going to talk about each game of the round, quick run through TLT, focusing on VC options as well as a couple of pods potentially too. So a big show, back to the full TLTs as well. We have every game this week to talk about. Mikey was going to come on board. He apologises, but work gets in the way sometimes. Had him all set up and then he got called out to Gosford. So he is not on this week. High hopes for next week because of the last minute stuff. I just thought, you know what? I'm heaps excited. I want to do TLT myself. So let's go for it. First of all, having a look at some strategy talk. Now, really important week in SuperCoach. Round 1's obviously very important, but we don't have any current data for that. Now that we're into round 2, we've seen some performances. We've got some data on board, and that's great. It's also very, very dangerous, which is why round 2 is so critical. So, a couple of quick pointers. Buying early. Now, there's a lot of guys who are looking at coming into teams at the moment who aren't going to change in price, who still do not have solidified roles. We've seen one round of footy, and it's really important not to get carried away with one round. Even though someone like Noah Martin is awesome, looks great, should have good job security, he's a prime example. If you're not going to start him in your 18 this week, then there's no need whatsoever to trade him in this week. There's a multitude of things that can happen. The best rule of thumb is always to avoid trading in anyone early if they aren't going to change in price, if you can trade them in the following week, and also if you need to see what their role is a bit more. Now, even though Nicholson might be out for the year, you might also have someone like Sasangi come back and play in the back row as well. And he could be on the bench at the moment because Timoko is on the bench. I see him probably starting at centre, pushing Sasangi onto the bench, and then there's potential for him to take edge minutes. It might not matter, but you know, if there's no downside to waiting a week, you always wait a week. Now, if you want to start Noah Martin, then that's fine. It's obviously, that's the payoff for you. You're going to get points this week and you think that he's going to score well. Each coach has to make that decision. But buying early is never something that you need to do. Following on from that, though, the other critical strategy point is planning. Now, a reason that you might want to buy early is because you really need to look at all of the cheapies and mids that you might have missed out on. Look at it over the next 2 weeks because obviously after round 3, they're going to change in price. So you've got to get the max value out of them. If you have 4 guys that you need to trade in over the next 2 weeks, then obviously you can't wait on some of these guys. You might have to get Martin in this week, and he's certainly a priority, for example. So if you've nailed everybody, though, then you might be in a great spot. You could be looking at trading in guns instead and waiting on the cheapies until next week. But that's all down to planning. It's a really important part of your early season strategy, making sure that you're going to be able to fit enough trades to get the guys that you want. As far as boosts go, look, you can use boosts many different ways. There's good arguments to use them in various fashion. For me, I'm always very keen on making sure that I get my team right early because it is critical. You can't miss out on must-have cash cows. You also can't miss out on points or the best matchups. And everybody makes mistakes with their team from the start. So I'm always a big believer in, look, if you need to use a boost round 1, you know what? You're going to use it in the first few rounds probably anyway. Just use it. If you need to, use it. But obviously don't use all of them 5 weeks in a row. But certainly using them early, I don't see any problem with it at all, even if it's after round 1. Round 2, good time to get your team ready. A lot of coaches will probably need to do 3 boosts. And look, 3 trades, I should say, with a boost. And look, the other thing too that is coming up heavily now is I guess a lot of new coaches are getting used to what a break even means and what it is. But even old coaches can get carried away at the moment because we're seeing break evens for the first time. They're not really going to mean much yet. Okay. You've got to wait because nobody's changing price just this week. The break even is after 3 games. We need those 3 games of data. It doesn't really matter right now. Now, after next week's data, it's going to matter a little bit more, but certainly after 1 week, the break even doesn't mean too much. The other important thing with the break evens to note is the worst time for somebody to have a big game that's going to increase their value is the first game of the season, because that is only going to be present for 1 price rise. So you're going to get the least value out of that round 1 game. So someone like Trindle, for instance, that went 130 plus, he's only going to get 1 price rise with that in his rolling average after round 3. And then that's going to drop out of his rolling average. Really, really important to understand that because people are flocking to Trindle at the moment. And I'm not going to talk about yet whether I think that's good or bad. We'll get to that in Market Watch. But you're flocking to Trindle because he went 130 plus in round 1. If he goes 15 and 25 the next 2, then he's going to get a moderate rise. And then he's going to have potentially a flat or even, high break even, because that 130 plus drops out and he's all of a sudden looking at losing that money that he just made a week later. So really important to know that, because if somebody goes bang in that 3rd game, that's awesome because they're going to get that 130 plus score, for example, 3 weeks in a row before it drops out. So 3 price rise benefits out of that score. Round 1, you don't do that. Round 2, you get the 2 rises. So really important to note that, because I see a lot of people going, look, I've got to get someone like Trindle. He went 130. He's going to make heaps of cash. Not necessarily. He's actually got to back it up. The chasing points and selling guns argument. Now, look, it's always very hard to predict after round 1 whether it is chasing points, whether you should sell guns. I would say Trindle is a good example of chasing points because his history says that he is not going to score like that. And he's got seasons where he has no tons. Statistically, if he's already got 130 plus score and you missed it, you're likely that you've missed the best score that he's going to have all season. So if you've already missed out on that, it's only downhill from there, and you've got to consider that. Same with, I guess, selling guns. There's a lot of popular trades where a gun that didn't fire is going out and they're going to somebody else, like a Cleary to a Hines, for example. Now, swapping guns out after 1 game often doesn't work out. And I say often because, look, sometimes these trades do work out, sometimes they're good. Even with the Trindle example, maybe he's having a career year. If you believe that, then by all means go for it, because, it happens sometimes. If he's having a career year, then the old stats don't really matter as much. But when you're looking at sort of a Cleary to Hines, look, you're just as likely for Hines to get the poor score this week and Cleary to go the 100 plus. And that's what happens when you're swapping out the elite guns. You've got to have them long enough for those big scores to come in for your guy. And Drinkwater is a good example of that. I understand like a Drinkwater to Turbo trade. I understand a Drinkwater to Ponga trade. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying you have to be aware of the downside, of the risks. And if you are and you want to go ahead, go for it. But for me, like I'm a Drinkwater owner, for example, I initially thought, look, I'd like to get Ponga with him. But he's been named now Drinkwater. And the problem with doing these trades is, you've copped the 21 and you're potentially going to trade him out for a low score of another gun and he's going to flip it and score 100 plus this week. That happens all the time. So you've got to be careful that you're not giving up on your guns too early. And again, like we said with the cheapies, you got another week with these guns, guys and girls. So just wait a week, see how they perform the second round. That is probably the safest bet rather than going off 1 game. Drinkwater could come out and look amazing this week. Ponga and Turbo could look terrible. You don't know. But 2 weeks of data makes it a little bit better and easier to sort of have a bit more of an understanding. And that's the last point I'll make with the strategy. We only have data for 1 week. And that 1 week of data, it is so skewed. There is multiple games there where rotations were completely out. We had HIAs, we had injuries, we had backs coming in, Spencer Lenu getting ruled out for the Roosters right before. Someone like Moses Suley, who went down injured, and also there were some other factors that saw Blake Laurie play under 15 minutes, which also meant that our Couchman got 60-plus minutes. That probably won't happen for the Dragons this week. It's an easy wait and see what those rotations look like again, because the second week of data, you're more likely to get those teams that experience injuries or HIAs probably not get them to the same degree, and you get a better idea of what those rotations might be. We still don't have the best idea, though, so some of it is still guessing. Even with Laban and Leka Helasima, for example, maybe Laban plays 80 minutes this week. But it happens. It's always best just to wait as long as possible to get as much data as possible before making your trades. Obviously, you need to make some this week. Just prioritize it based on all that information, that type of strategy when you're looking at the early season trades. Not saying don't make any of these trades. There's just a few tick boxes and a few things to ask yourself. I would always put the next 2 weeks as the one trading period, because that's the 2 weeks that you've got before players will start to fluctuate in pricing. So just plan ahead. Now, let's go to Market Watch. And Market Watch is very, very interesting for our first Market Watch of the year. The traded out candidates. Number one, Scott Drinkwater. Now, I already mentioned him a little bit. I'm definitely not saying do not trade him out. He's got a rib cartilage injury. He's been named to play. He's going to play. Rib cartilage, very painful. Done it myself. It hurts a lot, but it is just pain. It doesn't actually hinder you from your performance as far as being able to run, being able to do what you normally do, aside from it hurting. So, look, if he can run, it's not like it's a knee injury or something, and he's named. He's got 2 really good matchups. So I was torn on him myself. I'm still 50-50 on what I'm going to do, partially because someone like Ponga presents almost 200K in cash that I can use on a second trade. But the key thing to remember is with these guns, we've only seen Drinkwater that 1 week, and he's got a great draw, and that's why people like me and all you out there that own him actually brought him in probably to start the season. He has the Tigers, and then after the Tigers, he's obviously got the Gold Coast Titans, who gave up 50-plus to the Sharkies last week, and that's up at Townsville as well. That is some really good matchups for Drinkwater coming up in the next 2 weeks. The Tigers, his last 2 years of Tigers performances here, scored 71 points, 106 points, 105 points, 135 points. People will say, well, the Tigers are better now, Barnesy. We heard that at the start of last year too. He still tonned up on them, but granted. And what about the Gold Coast Titans? They don't look better this year than what they did last year. His last 4 for the Gold Coast Titans for the week after game, 132, 144, 59. So 3 out of 4 games against each of the next 2 opposition, Drinkwater has gone 100-plus, and some of those are big 100-plus scores, with 4 of them out of the 6 tons at 130-plus. That is massive. It is even more scary when you have a look at his career against those teams. Tigers' career, 86 average. 86. Equal best with the Gold Coast Titans. 73 high versus the West Tigers, 144 high versus the Gold Coast Titans. It does not get better for Drinkwater than the next 2 weeks on matchup-wise, and there is history to back that up. Recent and also historical going back. So, look, maybe the Cows go poorly, maybe he's hindered. The chances are that he scores well in the next 2 weeks. Okay, you can never say absolutes. The chances are he does do well. And the biggest thing to talk about with him is the fluctuation in trading at the moment. So currently he's around 22% owned. He's going to be sub 10% and a pod if the current numbers hold. So all of a sudden you've got a pod Drinkwater under 10% owned who's coming up against the best 2 opposition that he could go against in his career. It's very enticing to hold him, and it's actually a pod move to look at holding him. And one of those games you could even VC him for. So I'm not saying he's definitely going to go great, but there is food for thought there to have a look at that and reconsider if you think he's an immediate trade out. I'm actually leaning towards holding him myself. Let's have a look at some of the other guys, though, that are on this list. Laban, second most traded out. It does make sense. I understand if someone wants to pull the trigger this week. I'll go back to what I said earlier. If you don't need to do it this week and you can fit it in next week, fit it in next week. Daniel Atkinson and Jonah Pezzett, I'm going to put in the same boat here. So halves that did not fire round 1. I think it's a bit premature, to be honest, particularly on Pezzett. Yep, he scored in the teens, wasn't any good, but they got absolutely pounded with any cheap half that's near bottom dollar. All they need to do is hit that game where they get multiple attacking stats and they'll make bulk money very quickly. And again, when we talked about how getting 130 plus in round one is the worst time to do it as far as the value you get out of that price rise, it's also the best time to get like a 17 like Pezzett did, because that's only going to be there for 1 week of his price rises and then it's going to drop out. So it's actually better that he gets it out of the way in round one. Likewise with Atkinson as well. Now, Atkinson's a bit different because he's halfback. Certainly Pezzett at 5'8", I wouldn't be mucking around with 5'8" too much. I'd leave him as my second 5'8". I don't see the need to trade him out just because there was one really poor game. With Atkinson, if you don't have Sanders, then there is a good argument to go Atkinson to Sanders. That is the perfect opportunity to wait a week, though, and see what happens. Now, we've got some other guys that just, I guess, were popular but have not fired or are out. Cooper Bye, Mitchell Moses, Jermaine Hopgood. All those make sense, okay? Yeah, and some of those, like Mitchell Moses, I think that people are probably coming around to, look, maybe it was a mistake to start him over some of these other halfback options that went really well. I think that makes sense. Then we've got some middle forwards. Now, Jesse Colquhoun has been quite polarising, so I think it's great to have a discussion on him. I said in the preseason that I wasn't expecting big things, but I think that some people were being too hard on him, and I think that he's still a decent option. I still think he is. I thought he'd get about 50 minutes. He got 47, and that bench really didn't make any difference to that. He's likely to be around that 50-ish mark in his minutes. His PPM was slightly down for him to score 44 in 47 minutes. Normally you score 47, 48 points in that time. That is pretty good. So I don't see the need to be punting Jesse Colquhoun. I've also found it interesting that people are saying that Flegler's a much better option when, he's never actually averaged that many minutes in his career that Jesse just did, and his PPM is probably going to be about the same. So, I mean, I've seen someone do that trade today, and I think that's very sideways. Tino Fasuamali is going to go into the gun category along with Reece Walsh, and they're our two top 10 guns that are being traded out at the moment. Now, look, the Broncos are playing Para this week, and very similar conversation as what I had with Drinkwater. Not going to say you can't trade Reece Walsh out. I'm just going to, again, give people a little thing to think about. Parramatta is a really good opposition this week versus the Broncos. They had terrible defence last week against the Storm. Reece Walsh is just as likely to back up his 34 points from round one with a 100-plus score this week. So you want to be really careful not to be swapping out your guns and keep hitting bad scores because you're missing on the good scores because you keep getting rid of guys prematurely. That could be Reece Walsh this week. He is a possible captaincy option this week again. Tino, look, he didn't get the minutes. And if he's getting mid to late 40s in his minutes, it's not going to be enough for him. You do have the benefit of waiting another week, though, if you can. And one of the things that does happen, and I believe it's happened with Tino before, actually, about 3 years ago to start the season, but I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure about 3 years ago, he started off and he had 1 or 2 games that were low minutes. And then all of a sudden he was playing like 60 minutes. That could happen this week. He could turn around and play 60 and have a blinder. So against the Dolphins, I think they'll need him. And I don't think that pack is very good. One of the adjustments that the coach could make is say, hey, I got it wrong. I need to play Tino 60 minutes. And then all of a sudden he's just as good as a Keon Koloamatangi. So again, waiting the week when you can, it just helps with so many of these guys. I don't think there's too many of the straightforward trade-outs. I think it's pretty team-specific. It's also what you've got to do next week and your planning as well. But at the end of the day, you've got to take all this information and go with your gut. If you think that someone like Reece Walsh is just going to have a really bad start to the season because you didn't like what you saw, you thought it was a mistake, fix your mistake then, because you've always got to go with your gut and what you think, but just keep all the considerations in mind when you make that decision. The trade-ins. So Noel Martin already talked about, but I'll just reiterate that I'm going to wait a week on him because I can trade him in next week quite easily. And I want to make sure that Sasangi doesn't take some of his minutes if Timoko goes back into the centres, which I believe will happen as far as that centre spot. Kalen Ponga, really good trade-in. Playing Manly this week. He gave up 29 points last week in Golden Point. I thought they could have given up even more. The Raiders were not very good, or maybe it was a mix of Manly having good defence, but the start of that game, the first 20 or 30 minutes, there was a lot of time where the Raiders could have scored in that red zone and they didn't come away with anything. So I think it's a good matchup for Newcastle. It would be much better, obviously, at home. Ponga's coming off a 100-plus score. And now that we know he's goal kicking as well, and we also know that Fletcher Sharp's going to be out too, I do think that that's going to get him more ball. So I quite like the trade in a Ponga. I've actually got him over Turbo at the moment myself because he's cheaper and he's goal kicking, whereas Turbo isn't. So that's my differentiation between the two. Then we got some other cheapies and mids to talk about, but probably the other gun is Latrell Mitchell, which I'm only going to just touch on before we move to the cheapies and mids getting traded in. Latrell Mitchell, I thought was close to a must-have in the preseason. I said that to just about everybody, and I think that I'm vindicated with that. He loves playing the Roosters as well. As long as he doesn't get sent off, it should be a good week for him again. So I 100% understand people downgrading like an Eero or something to him to get Latrell in, because, again, I thought he was pretty close to a must-have with the goal kicking and the potential for that left-hand side attack at South Sydney. Mid guys, Cody Walker, his teammate, a lot of people bringing him in after he tonned up. I think it's super warranted, especially if you've gone a bit rogue in that 5'8" spot and you just think that you made a mistake, or if you went cheap there. Cody's only $3.99, and I think that he's going to have some more of those tons ahead as well. So really good trade-in. Now we've got guys like Sua Falongo, who also went 100+, and anyone who listened to this show in the preseason, you'd know that he was my favourite of the mid fullbacks. I didn't go Kinney. Thought the Titans would struggle, and I thought Sua won't struggle because he's with Melbourne and they're going to score points, basically. It was what it came down to. I loved his tackle breaks and try scoring ability. Very happy with that decision, obviously, and I would 100% be trying to get Sua in this week or next week. I kind of think he's a bit of a must-have, and the difference with waiting a week for him is the Dragons are a really good opposition for him. And I do think that he's got potential for another big score this week. So that's the point where you go, you know what, I can't wait because I want to get that good prime matchup this week against the Dragons. And I would be prioritising him if you want him. Moses Leo as well. You know, if he's somebody where you're downgrading somebody to him, then you might be wanting to play him. And it's definitely a good week to look at playing those Melbourne Storm guys because they are looking very, very juicy. Now, other guys that I did touch on, Braden Trindle, another mid at 417,000. I just want to make sure people understand, I'm not saying that there's no way that Trindle can go on with this and have a great season, but his seasons prior, where he's playing 80 minutes, 43 points per game and 57 points per game the last 2 years. Even the year before, most of his games were at 80 minutes and he got 43 points per game. 80-minute roundup. It's like late 40s. So he's basically been around a 50-ish average for 3 years prior to this season. He's priced at a 43. So at the moment, he's presenting 5, 6, 7 points of value if he deviates back to the mean of what his career has been. So if you are buying him, you are buying him on the provision that you think that he's going to have a career year, that he's going to be a different player than what we've seen from him before. And that's quite a big ask for him. He might do it. I just want to remind everyone of the draw. You've missed out on the Gold Coast Titans game where we thought that the Sharks would go big and they did. You bring him in for a game against Penrith, who just beat Brisbane and who love playing at Carrington Park, where this game is away from Shark Park. I think it's a terrible week to be bringing in Braden Trindle. Then we've got the Dolphins, although it's at home. That's decent points. That's a good matchup. Then the Sharkies are away at GIO, which is not a good matchup for them. And then at home versus the Warriors and the Roosters before a round 7 bye. There's actually a really good period from round 8 for the Sharkies, where they've got the Cowboys, the Tigers, South Sydney, and then a tough one against the Bulldogs before they have a bye. That's a better few games coming out of that bye. I'll be waiting a week and making my decision on Trindle, but there's obviously some people that need to make the trade this week. I tend to think that he is, even if he has a career season, I think it'll still be 60 or around that point. I don't think he's going to go to a 60s average or a 70s average or anything like that. So that'll be good enough to make 100K potentially. It'll be a slow burn 100K for him to get to a 100K if he's doing around a 59, 60 average, but you'll get there. Do you want that spot taken up by him for 2 months to get there? Up to each coach. Then we've also got the real cheapy guys. Sorry, Trey Mooney, pretty much have to get him in after that first round performance and seeing his minutes. Ryan Couchman's coming in as one of the cheapies, as is Ethan Sanders. These guys scream wait list, particularly Couchman. He could easily play 35 minutes this week. He got massive extra inflated minutes in that round 1 game because of the injuries that happened to the Dragons, because of the change in their pack. We already spoke about how Laurie didn't get on. I said earlier he got 13 minutes or something. He didn't even get on because of the rotations and because of them having to replace a back. So Little's coming back into the side as well. We don't know how that'll change the rotation. It screams wait and see. He's a very talented player. If they believe in him and they want to give him minutes this week, then by all means, it could be Ryan Couchman's season. But you got to see that first. You can't do it off one game where we don't know the rotation. And there's so many other options instead of him. All right, let's go to TLT quickly and run through those. Before we do this TLT, we're going to bring it to you as an audience by our partner, oneworldcourier.com.au. One World Courier are a great freight and shipping service. If the business that you work for or the business that you own has any freight or shipping needs, even if you've got to send containers or pallets or even just small things like envelopes, they will help you out. They can do it nationally or internationally. You can sign up for a free account as well. It costs you nothing to have a look. If you go to oneworldcourier.com.au today and sign up for an account, it'll say, where did you hear about us? Put NRL Allstars podcast. That way they'll know that you came from this show and they'll give you a great rate card to trial them and start off with. But they are basically a compare the market shipping company that takes care of it all for you. So it will show you all the different providers that you can use to ship whatever you're shipping. And then you just pick what provider that you want, pay for it, they'll take care of it all for you. So it's really that simple and it gives you so many great options. oneworldcourier.com.au, go get on them today. All right, TLT time. Now, when we're having a look at it, the first game is the Broncos and the Eels. I mentioned the CVC option for Walsh. Oh, I think it's a huge one. I think it's a great opportunity to put a VC on Walsh if you're an owner, particularly if you look at the fact that his ownership's going to drop significantly. It's going to be a pod captaincy potentially. Broncos should bounce back, you would expect. Do the Eels? Not sure. They don't have Hopgood. They are going to be playing at Suncorp Stadium as well. That's not particularly easy for them. The other option in this one, though, is anyone who watched the Eels get mauled by the Melbourne Storm in round one would have seen that Harry Grant tore that middle to shreds. And I think that screams Payne Haas as well. Hakeem Haas, I should say. So Haas looks like a great option to have a bounce back. He still played close to 70 minutes last game. And even though he only scored 68 points, the minutes were there, and that's the biggest thing. VC on him, if you've got some loop options, I think it's really, really handy. Particularly if you've got like a Haywood at hooker along with like a Marnie at hooker. You can just not play a hooker that week and go for the loop using Haywood, and that works out really, really well. Likewise, if you've got Brandon Smith there, you could just use the loop with him. But I think a VC on Payne Haas is a good one, and I expect him to go 80 plus as well. Not really any particular pods or other changes in this one to chat about. So we will go to the next game, which is the Warriors and the Raiders. This one's going to be over in New Zealand again. So it's 2 treks in a row away from GIO Stadium for Canberra, which isn't great for them. And the Warriors look fantastic in round one. I would wait before I'm going to a Tanner Boyd. I'd want to see a bit more from him, like was sort of said with some of the other guys. As far as sit starts go, I'm really not sure. I did think that the Roosters could put some more points on the Warriors if they wanted to and played better. And I do think that starting some of these Canberra Raiders, I still would. Like, if I had Noah Martin, I'd probably start him this week. And if we're going to talk about pods, I'm just going to throw out there that the old horse, Corey Horsburgh, he was pretty good round one, and he's sort of been a favourite of the podcast for years. And then last year he sort of fell off a little bit, but he still ended up averaging 61. He threw up 75 points on the weekend in 67 minutes. Now, granted, that had some golden point in it, but his minutes were still really high, and he had a 63 raw base. For someone who's 595,000, I think he's really got under the radar. If you were looking at someone like Koloamatangi and going, look, I really wish I could get Koloamatangi, but I can't because I've got too many rabbits. I really want one of those guys that's got high minutes in the middle, really high work rate, and guaranteed high points. Corey is going to be the light version of Keon Koloamatangi, it looks like, if he can continue with those minutes. Now, even if those minutes drop a bit, if it's close to 60 and he drops 7 minutes, that's still going to be, a 65-point plus type of game for him. So last season, he only averaged 52 minutes a game. But if you go back to 2023, he averaged 62 minutes a game, much closer to what he's doing right now in round one, and he averaged 62 points for that. So, look, minutes in the 60s, he should be able to give you 1 ppm at least. So, maybe a watch, but certainly at 595k, I think that he could be coming back to his gun days. And round 11, their first buy, which is great. And then he's going to play that first big buy round in round 12 as well. So he could come in really handy if he's not playing State of Origin. VC and C, I would just stick clear of this one myself. Roosters and Rabbits. Right. Big matchup. I'm praying that we don't get send-offs and we get a really good game. I'm going to play everyone in this because it's those type of matchups. But as far as pods, I think that a few people were asking me, well, there was a few people asking me about Nat Butcher, what his role would be. I didn't know if he'd get 80 minutes, but he did, which was quite surprising. But he's been replaced with Siwa Wong now. James Tedesco is probably the big talking point in this one. He scored 92 points last round, was a good captaincy option. And against the Rabbits, he has had some big scores before. He's got an 80 average with a 140 high. 80 average puts it about in the middle. 140 high is pretty big for him. I think it's a decent matchup to have a look at it. I would VC him if you could, but I'm considering the straight C on Teddy. I think there could be points galore in this one. And I'm hoping that we limit our penalties a little bit. Robert Toya back will certainly help. But a lot of people still have Sam Walker. I wouldn't give up Sam Walker straight away. I certainly think he's a good pick still. And I certainly think you could look at a VC option for him in this one as well. But look, a lot of good players in this one. And I do think it's going to be a good game for SuperCoaches. Tigers Cowboys, talking about a good game for SuperCoaches. I understand that the Tigers are going to be better this year and everything else. This isn't down about the Tigers. I think they could win, very much so. But they may very well win 36-30, and that would be a great game for SuperCoach. And I do see that happening. I think there is some points in this one. Macassini is a big talking point. He is at centre, not wing. I don't know if I like that more or not. His base should be higher. He should get a little bit more ball. Maybe less chances to score tries, though. The other big news is that we've got KPP in for the Tigers. There was a chance that he was going to miss this game. I actually think that he's a decent pod. Playing at the Tigers, attacking upside as well against that edge for the Cowboys, and also 80 minutes with, I guess, a point to prove, moving from Newcastle where he didn't really get much ball. I could see him doing well. We've got Drinkwater here as well as the massive pod VC option. I couldn't possibly put a C on him, but there is some options later on that you could see. 100% he is an under-the-radar great VC option where you can really get ahead early in this season if you VC him and he fires. Harry Talangi's a pod, though. Spoke about him before the season started, how I really, really liked him as a pod. I ended up going Greg Marju instead out of the two. But Murray scored 88 SuperCoach points in round one, and he did that with a double, but I thought he looked dangerous, and I reckon it's still at 648,000. I said in the first few rounds, I think he'll outscore a lot of the other guns, potentially even the Euros and Totos and these guys that are more fancied. This is a great week to have a look at him if you do believe that he'll go well over the next fortnight. Lukey, definite starter. Really like him running at that Tigers edge as well. And, I'm going to put up a bit of a strange one here. On the watch list, I got Jason Taumalolo on there. I actually thought he was outstanding in round one. And it might be a watch this from more real life anyway. But, look, he went 49 points in 43 minutes. Great PPM. And if he can keep that up and get a few extra minutes, which I think they need him for, it'll be really interesting because I think Peyton should be playing him in the 50s in the minutes. And I'm watching that very keenly, particularly for draft, because I might need a front row, second row forward type guy. So for draft, I think there should be watch lists on Taumalolo. We're going to move along to the next game, the Dragons and the Storm. Okay. I am definitely benching guys like Atkinson and two, and then there's obviously forwards here like Toby Couchman that are reasonably popular. He's a great play. The games that are tough with the Storm, it's still pretty good for the forward pack, and this one is away for the Storm as well, so that does help the Dragons a little bit. Certainly, I'm pretty keen to see if the Storm can back up with a lot of points again this week because I thought their attack was really good. One of the guys I'm looking at potentially getting in and spending my money on is Harry Grant. So Harry looked great round one at 600k is good value. I wasn't massive on him. I said in the preseason, it is good value if he has a good season, but he has to bounce back because he only went 62 last year. I saw enough of him where I think that the captaincy might have actually really helped him. He seemed to really be involved more than some games last year. He could be in for the best year that he's had for a few years if he can keep up that form. So I think that there's definitely a good argument for him. Lasardi and Chen went ballistic last week. I'd be happy to start both against the Dragons' edges, but I only own one. And if I don't own the other one, Blore is on the extended bench. He is on his way back. I will just say, if you haven't bought one of them yet, I would really want to watch this game more than anybody else. I would want to wait on these two edges for the Storm. I know a lot of people say Chan has won the right-hand side edge spot, so, it's definitely the Sardi go. It's really not the case. There's been so many different variations talked about in the preseason that have not been mentioned enough. Firstly, that Blore could swap sides and go on the right-hand side because he is the veteran out of the back rowers that they have, and they might want that experience like for like more on that right-hand side next to Hughes. The other thing that was talked about is that Blore could go into the middle rotation and play 13 off the bench. The other thing was Lasardi could go into the middle rotation as well and still end up getting 50-plus minutes off the bench. And with his PPM, 48 tackles on an edge in round one, that's still going to be really good for him. So, there's a lot to watch in this one. And I think more than any of the other cheapy forwards, I'd want to wait on which ones I'm going to buy out of the Storm if I missed out on one of them. On the next one, we've got the Penrith Panthers versus the Cronulla Sharks. I don't think the Sharkies are going to have it as easy as last week, that's for sure. Certainly going to bench forwards like Colquhoun. I know I said, I still like him. I don't think you should sell him necessarily. But I think he's good for a 50 meat and potatoes. You probably want the upside. You don't want to cop a 45 or something as well. And he could do that. Really tough though when you got guys like you're obviously going to play Hines, but when you got guys like Eero like me, how well can he go if the Panthers are on fire? This one could be a bit of a tough tussle. I'm not sure. So Hines versus Cleary. I think it's pretty ballsy to captain either of them at this point from what we saw. Hines beat up on a poor Gold Coast outfit. I don't expect those points to be there in this one. Likewise, Penrith went pretty well and Cleary had a pretty low score for his standards in that type of win. I wouldn't be confident with either of them. I would stick to the fullbacks myself. Papali'i is a pod to talk about for this one, though. I was really bummed that he went back to the bench last week because I think that he was a great option. In saying that, he went to the bench and still played 67 minutes and scored 57 points with 48 in raw base. At 579,000, he's a massive smoky for the next few weeks to look at in your second row, but more so for draft. I'd run in draft to get him. He's named to start again. If he doesn't revert back to the bench and he does get 80-plus minutes, and I think they look much better with him starting on the edge and playing the 80 minutes, then it's great. Keep in mind, though, Liam Martin is coming back, so we need to see how that shakes out. But I would assume that Garner would go back to the bench and Liam Martin would take that spot. That seems like the likely scenario. Eagles and Knights. Look, we've got two great fullbacks going against each other that both scored 100-plus last week, and either one of them could be a good captaincy option. I don't think either's going to score poorly, so I would be comfortable taking the plunge and captaining either of them. I'm actually more comfortable with Ponga or Turbo over going a Cleary or Hines just because of how that game could shake out. And this Knights Seagulls game, I reckon that there could be some decent points in it. Pod talk, Kohler I loved in the preseason, got him in my draft side and I targeted him and was really happy to get him. He scored 108 points on the weekend, 2 line breaks in that. And he had 40 raw base, just raw base, and then all the tackle breaks on top. He was a 50-plus floor on the weekend. He looked scintillating running the ball, and they do have a round 3 bye, which is the one big bummer. Can't really bring him in this week, but does give you another week to have a look at him and see what he looks like at 43,000. There's every chance that he goes real premium this year and is a forgotten gun from last year because he averaged 66 points in 2025 and he's an uber pod. So I'm keenly watching that. I wish I didn't have a buy last week because I think he'd be more of an option, but they do. On the night side, I mentioned I went Marju. I was really happy with that as my pod option in my centre wing. I still think that it's a great option. He was a 50 base power last year. He went close to that in his first game, but also got the line break try, ended up at 73 points. He was very close to getting a second try as well. I like Marju at 611,000. I think there's quite a bit of value there. And after this week, they're at home for the first time at McDonald Jones Stadium. Granted versus the Warriors, but the Warriors away from home are also a different beast. So a couple of real good pod outside backs there in this one that I'm keenly watching. When we're going along, we obviously have the Dolphins and Titans as the last game. And this one, could be a cracker for SuperCoaches that own Dolphins. There is so much to look at here. I was pretty impressed with the Dolphins' attack on the weekend. I thought they could have scored more points, but obviously disappointing loss to South Sydney. I didn't see the Titans getting a hell of a lot better in this, so I really think that they're going to miss Campbell significantly again. They got in good positions last week. Lachlan Ilias wasn't able to convert on some of his kicks and getting field position and stuff, and even putting him in spots to get points. I just think the Dolphins are going to put 30 plus at a minimum, and they've got potential to go 50 or 60 if the Titans don't turn up like they did the first half of last week against Cronulla. If that happens, as a non-Herbie Farnworth owner, I am extremely, extremely worried. Herbie scored last week on a pretty lucky try. He didn't really have a huge impact in the game, and he still managed to score 75 points, 44 raw base. Not base power, raw base. That's what you got Herbie for. 84 average last year. It looks like that he could get back to it because 75 was a quiet game for him. It's this week, he could easily score a double. And when you look at what he's done previously, at the Gold Coast Titans, he has tonned up, but he hasn't got any of his big scores against them yet. I'd be really worried that could change, and he could be 130 plus of this week. So for a guy that can put up 150 plus score, I'm actually looking at getting him in for someone like Euro this week just because I'm so worried about that matchup against the Titans. It was probably an error on my part with my personal team taking Herbie out. I tried to save money and put it elsewhere. But look, other guys on this Dolphins side that look really good as options at the moment, both of their edges there, Fini Fuiaki, I didn't expect to be starting, and he did, and he played 80 minutes. Need to say with the edges, though, that they do have Plath coming back. We don't know where he's going to play necessarily. So Feedy is going to go back into that pack, even though it's a middle that could push other guys around. But if Fini Fuiaki is going to keep playing 80 minutes on an edge at 450,000, it's phenomenal value. And 82 points, it did have a try, but 51 raw base. And this is the thing, he's got such good floor. He's got some power stats in there as well. It's almost a mirror image of the other side where you've got Lemuelu, who, if he continues playing 80 minutes, he's always looked like a bit of a star, potentially. 76 points, 54 raw base, no try. That's phenomenal as well. 530,000 is a bit more expensive. I do think Lemuelu's got more job security, but if you have a look at those Titans edges, if you've already got Herbie and you want to target someone else, Connolly Lemuelu at 530k, I think he's fantastic. And Fini Fuiaki, he might lose minutes in his spot first. Lemuelu, I think, is the guy that's won that edge spot. So, yeah, both of those guys could work out. Fini Fuiaki, you probably want to see another week. But look, sometimes fortune favours the bold. And if you had Fini Fuiaki at 450k, he could go really well and score another try this week. So I really like those guys. Asako's obviously going to be the goal kicker. He was pretty quiet last week until he went over for a try late, which put him on 79 points. Now, he's only 609,000. So we're talking about guys like Marju at 611 and some of these other guys around the 600 mark of Brian Toto. Asako has an amazing matchup this week, as does the other winger, Selwyn Cobbo, at 525,000. So certainly these guys are good buys anyway, regardless of the current matchup. But if you do want to get any of them in the next couple of weeks or you're thinking about it, I think that you've just got to get them this week because you need to get that Titans matchup there just in case the Dolphins do go huge. And the biggest pot of them all is certainly going to be the Hammer because people have their fullback spots really full and he could go huge this week. He's a guy that scored 4 or 5 tries previously in a game and gone 150 plus last year. He could do that again in this one. So pretty worried that I don't really have any Dolphins players and I am going to look at potentially targeting them. Does that mean that we can captain anyone? Look, it's pretty tough, but look, Herbie with his floor at the moment and what he showed last year, he's going to be a good captaincy option. And I do think that people will stay off him because the fullbacks are so popular at the moment. And even the halves, people will still stick with a Cleary or even Hakeem Haas as an option straight up. Some people will do that. So, Herbie, I think it's a really good option to consider because I do think it's the best matchup for points this round. That is the podcast for this week, though. SuperCoach TLT round 2. We'll be back next week with Mikey on board. And certainly make sure that you jump on YouTube, iTunes, and Spotify and hit subscribe on all of those so you can make sure you can get the episodes straight away. And also give us a follow on social media. We're on X, we're on Facebook, we're on Insta as well. And we'll be back next Tuesday with round 3. Until then, good luck with the round. Enjoy the footy this weekend. Can't wait to talk all about it again next week.
You'll never know if you don't go. You'll never shine if you don't glow. Hey now, you're an all-star. Get your game on, go play. Hey now, you're a rock star. Get the show on, get paid. Only shooting stars break the mold.